Hi folks, this is Tim Garman for SIT on NZDP101, and I'm looking at some of the week 2 work, and this is one of the images that you will need to work on. This is the Willa image. You have 4 images for week 2 that have to be uploaded to the discussion board, and we're going to just work through one of those 4 so that hopefully you can know what to do with this one and the other 3. So I have this image open in Lightroom Classic. Now just be aware there are 2 versions of Lightroom. One is just called Lightroom, one is called Lightroom Classic, and that is the more extensive program. And here we see this image is really quite underexposed. It's an image by Phil Davidson, one of the previous tutors, that is supplied to just demonstrate how we can lighten this up and what we can do in Lightroom Classic. So first of all, let's just close down these tabs so you can see what's available there, and you'll notice that it's quite similar to the tabs available in Adobe Camera Raw. So first of all, let's open up the basic tab, and we can straight away bring the exposure up quite a bit, and we're going to deal with the shadows as well. So we'll take those up to or down, I should say. So the girl's looking much brighter now. Keeping in mind that this is a beach photograph, we want to make the sand look a bit more inviting perhaps, and it's also got a bit of a blue cast to it, particularly noticeable in the shadows, but we can just adjust the colour temperature to the warmer side and you see the sand looking a little bit more inviting. Now we don't want to go too drastic on this or it starts to look unnatural, so you've got to keep in mind all the time that you want your images to look natural. Now why is that? Well, obviously you can do lots of edits in Photoshop, Camera Raw and Lightroom that give you a much more artistic end result that wouldn't necessarily look natural. But for this course, because we want to be able to compare it to something to see if it's right, we're going to keep things looking natural, so we can look at nature and say, well, does that look natural? Does that look right? And for sand, I think that's probably okay. We can just go perhaps a tad warmer. So already that's looking a little bit more user-friendly. Now at this point, I should point out that as I've mentioned Adobe Camera Raw, if we hold the Control key down and click on the image, and you might find if you're on a PC it's just a right click, but we have the option to edit in Photoshop. And in fact, if we go to open as smart object in Photoshop, let's see what that does. Just bear with me while my computer thinks about how it's going to cope with that. So that image is now open in Photoshop, and you'll see in the layers palette we have the one layer, and it's already indicated as a smart object because it's got the document icon in the corner of the layer thumbnail. And if I double click that icon, the image opens up in Camera Raw containing the same edits that I've done in Lightroom. So that's a great way of being able to skip between the 2 programs and further editing in Camera Raw. So let's just close that down, and we'll close the Photoshop image down and go back to Lightroom. So next, it would be good to be able to just help the figure stand out a bit from the background. So, but in fact, before we do that, let's just have a look at the histogram, because I can see in that stick, particularly on the highlights, that it's burnt out a little bit. and you see where the red clipping is showing. We go to the histogram, we can turn that on and off. So the red is highlighting that that area is burnt out. So we should really take the highlights down to adjust for that, and we can take the whites down a bit as well, and we see that that's disappearing. So that's a good indication of any areas that are burnt out. If we can have a look at the blacks, I don't expect that there's anything there that's burnt out, but if we increase the blacks, we start to see that where that's happening. So indicated in blue, those would be areas of black that are losing detail. But this is looking okay. So let's think about cropping. We have a crop tool, and when we click that, we get a useful grid, and we can just pull that in so that the girl is sitting on that third. And you'll notice the area outside, the area that I've cropped, is still available. So let's double click the image and that will crop in. So next I want to have a look at, we'll just close the basic tab down. I'm going to have a look at masking, and that's this circular icon. So when we click the masking tool, we get some various options for what we can do with masks. For the moment, I'm just going to look at the brush tool, because that enables us to start to add a mask. And when we select that, the brush tool, we see we've got some controls over size. And let's just take the size up. You see that we're getting quite a large brush now. And when we apply that to the image, it puts a mask over the top, indicated in red or pink. And you see that there's a degree of transparency to it as well, so we can see what we're masking. Now, this kind of thing takes a bit of effort. One or two things to mention about the brush tool that I'm using. I can control the size by the wheel on my mouse, and I can control the amount of feather by holding down the Shift and Control key and using the wheel on the mouse. So the feather being the amount of fade that edge has got. But I'm really going to want to go in closer and be a bit more accurate. So I'm going to need a much smaller brush. Perhaps I'll take the feather down a bit, and I'm going to zoom in with the Command plus key, or that's on a Mac. On a PC, the Control and plus key. And so I can now get in a lot closer. Now, I'm not going to do all of this. In fact, well, I am going to do all of it, but I'm actually going to pause the video while I do it so that you don't have to sit through me going through it, because it will take a minute or two to getting close to that. But I'll just show you how much of this I'm going to do. So I want to come in close, and if I don't, if I start to edit and adjust exposures and things, I'm going to get a halo around the figure, and I don't want that. So I want to be right up close to the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect, but wants to be pretty close. And because we're blurring the edge with a feather, that's going to hide some of it as well. It means I don't have to be quite as perfect as I need to be. So let's go smaller, come in close. And also we want to just remember that there are holes to fill in as well. And one other thing to mention, let's go in close to her hand. This brush, if I hold down the Option key on a Mac, the Alt key on a PC, you notice it turns to a minus symbol, And I actually have two different sizes that I can play with. So if I've got a large brush with the plus symbol where I'm painting my mask, if I'm editing the mask and taking some of it away, I hold down the Option key, I get a different set of sizes. And that's quite useful because if I'm editing, I'm going to want to be more accurate. And I keep the Option key held down while I'm doing that. I have a much smaller brush to just tidy things up. And then go back to the previous one, and that's a different size. So I'm going to pause the video at this point and finish off that masking, and then come back and we'll carry on. Okay, that's the masking complete. Now I can toggle it on and off here. And also, if I needed to change the colour of the mask for any reason, the red button there indicates what colour I'm using at the moment. But I can click there and change it. Now that I've got my area masked, I've got an effect area here, and I can open that up and we can see we have controls over the effect that I've just created. And these are similar, or pretty much match the controls that are in the basic tab. So if I switch off my mask and increase or decrease the exposure, I should say, we see that we can adjust the background now without affecting the girl, so she remains much lighter. Now I can see there's a slight halo, so I could just go in and adjust some of that around the edges. But that's looking pretty good now, so that's probably enough. One more thing that I'd like to do is just add a little bit more clarity into her face as really the focal point of the image. So first thing we'll do is create a new mask, and we'll select brush, and we'll just go in and indicate that area of her face. Now we can then switch the mask off, and again in this effect box we've got clarity. We can, if we decreased it, we can see that her face starts to get a little bit blurred, but let's increase it, and just helps her eyes and eyelashes to stand out in her face, her facial features, and that's probably enough. So that's really it for retouching on this image. This needs to be posted to the discussion board, as I mentioned earlier. Don't forget when you do that to obviously to include the other 3 photographs as well. So there's 4 photographs to edit, but include on the discussion board some comments about how you found the process. Did you find any problems? How did you overcome them? What if you tried something else, what did you do? But once you've posted that information on the discussion board, make sure you also give some feedback to other students, because this is how the discussion boards will work, and this is how they're being graded. So it's not so much the work that you're doing on the discussion boards. I'm going to be grading your feedback to other people, other students. Then in week 3 you have 4 more images to edit, and these will be uploaded to assignment A.